Sacraments play a central part in Catholic life, so it's good to think a bit about what a sacrament is and how sacraments work with the help of St Thomas Aquinas. Remember that St Thomas was writing a long time before the Protestant Reformation, so we are much more sensitive about certain words than he was. To the question of what a sacrament is, St Thomas replies that they are sacred signs. I think when modern Catholics hear someone saying that sacraments are signs, they are inclined to understand that in the Protestant way, that the sacraments are tokens. By tokens, I mean a rather narrow view of signs, which sees them as stand-ins for the real thing. St Thomas, in calling the sacraments signs, does not mean they are stand-ins for something real. He means they communicate something. They are part of God's communication with us. And God's communication is always of something real. When God speaks, things happen. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. St Thomas thinks that in the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, something very like God's act of creation is happening, so that when Jesus says, "This is my body," it really is his body. Calling it a sign is not, as it might be for our Protestant brothers and sisters, about saying that it is not really his body, but only a token for his body. It is about calling to mind the fact that God, in the Eucharist and the other sacraments, is showing us something, communicating something to us. St. Thomas calls them effective signs. So in the sacraments, God shows us something, but he also does what he shows us. The sacraments show us God in his action in our lives. Actually, St. Thomas thinks sacraments are a particularly rich kind of sign. They all have a double layer. He thinks that in a sacrament you see and hear something done. He says this is a sign only. So in the Eucharist, we see the appearances of bread and wine. They are sign only. They are the sign of Jesus Christ, our true food and true drink. But of course, Jesus is really present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. And once we have added that, I suspect many of us would stop. But St. Thomas goes further. Jesus, really present in his body and blood, is a further sign. St. Thomas calls the presence of Christ in the Eucharist a reality and sign. It is a reality. Jesus really is present. But in the Eucharist, he is also a sign, and remember, an effective sign of something else. St. Thomas says that Christ in the Eucharist is an effective sign of the union with God which we hope to enjoy fully in heaven. In receiving the Eucharist, we are shown how God unites us to himself, and also we are actually united. St. Thomas calls this reality only. So we have the sign only, the appearances of bread and wine. We have the reality and sign, Christ really present as our heavenly food and drink. And we have the reality only, union with God and each other in love. The sacraments, says St. Thomas, are for this life only. There will be no Eucharist in heaven. That is because in heaven we will enjoy what the sacraments show us and make real, but in a new way. The final reality of the sacraments, what St. Thomas calls the reality only, does not pass away in heaven. In that way, all the sacraments are signs, and again effective signs, of life in heaven. The reality they speak about at their deepest level, we hope one day to enjoy. So even in this life, they give us a glimpse of future glory in heaven. How do the sacraments do that? Well, it's not possible for us to grasp that completely because it is a mystery. But what we do see is that the sacraments aren't magic. They aren't incantations by the priest to somehow gain favor with God. Rather, when the priest speaks and acts, when he says, "This is my body," and raises the host, God uses him as an instrument to speak God's own words and perform God's own actions. That is why sacraments do not depend on the holiness of the priest, thank God, but on the power of God. Of course, priests should strive for holiness to make themselves signs of what God carries out through them. But the sacraments are truly about God himself speaking and acting for his people to bring us all to him. So that is the end of our series. I hope you've enjoyed these talks. I've certainly enjoyed preparing them and giving them. It's been a lot of work, but a very, very fruitful amount of work. And I hope they have enlightened you just a little in thinking about what our parish patron, St Thomas Aquinas, teaches. If you have any questions or you ever want to talk to me about this, I'm someone who loves to talk about St Thomas Aquinas. So if you ever want to ask me about this, either in the comments or face-to-face or via whatever medium you like, I'm always happy to discuss these things. Have a wonderful and blessed feast of St Thomas tomorrow, and I'm sure I will see you all again soon. God bless.